Hi everyone, my name is Hannah Collison from Inspired Creations, Surrey School of Sugarcraft, and today I'm going to show you how to make a foxglove in sugar. So here's a picture of the project that I'm going to be showing you. It's just a snapshot of the foxglove. Of course, you can make so many more petals and flowers for it. And if you'd like to join in, I shall just share with you the kit list. And this kit list you can, if you email me on hannah@inspiredcreations.uk.com, then I'm happy to email this out to you. So here we go. First of all, there's a lot of different shades of foxglove that you can decide to make, from deeper colours to just simply white with a hint of pale green. This one has got burgundy spots and these more plummy shades here, or possibly some fuchsia pink petal dust in there as well. So you can decide, but apart from colouring the paste for the buds and bracts just pale green using gooseberry green, the actual flowers themselves are made white and coloured afterwards, because there are areas of white, and that's a colour that's very difficult to add in after you've created the piece. So yes, we're going to be working in white for the petals. First of all, I'm going to show you how to make the center piece. Like a cage, will support the flower and hold it open. So you can make a quick cage using 3 24 gauge or 3 26 gauge half length cut wires. And I'm just going to bend in a little angle at about 1.5 centimeters in from the end of the wire. This is just so that we know where this cage will start. And these 3 wires then can be taped down in half width Nile green stem tex tape. So just gather the 3 together, and where the bends are is where you will join them with the tape. Don't worry too much, as long as they're all in at the same level, it's fine. So the tape will go in, and then you can actually tape all the way down the stem. It's a good idea to go pretty much all the way, so you haven't got lots of straggly wires. So if that happens, you can just take another piece of tape and continue down to the end. Then come back to the top here, and between your tweezers, you can start to bend a little curve just by moving the tweezers 1 millimeter at a time and just turning them slightly so that you can curve rather than angle. We don't want a sharp bend. We want something that's a bit goblet, like, you know, nice and curved. So we've got a little cage like this. Now that's the cheats way of creating the support that holds the flower open, and you'll see what I mean when we do the flowers themselves. The other way is more technical, which is actually to create 4 stamens and a pistil for the center, which I'll show you how to do, but it's not necessary to add this to each flower unless you're doing competition work, or particularly on something that is very botanically accurate. To make the 4 stamens for the center, if you're making a botanically accurate flower, you need 4 these are 3rd cut 28 gauge wires. Okay, so 3rd length 28 gauge wires. And I'm just going to take my tweezers just short of the top here, probably about 3 mil, and bend over a hook. And then if I clamp just short of halfway and turn the tweezers towards me at a 90-degree angle, so it makes the end that's been cut go down to the floor, and we just pinch it shut, you'll find you create yourself a little T-bar shape. Okay, so that's the first thing we need to do, is actually create T-bars on all 4 of these stamens. So clamp, don't make them too big, because you want it's very small what you're making here. And then once you've turned it over, you can clamp just just in from the top there and turn it at an angle so the cut end goes down towards the surface. And then you've got something that resembles a little bit of a T shape. I'll show you again. So I bent it down the floor and you can see it's open a little bit here. So between my finger and thumb, just pinching it to close it up a little bit. And then if you look at it from the side, you can see that it has a T shape to it. Turn it on its side, clamp just short of halfway, bend down to the cut end down to the surface at a 90 degrees, press to close, and then you can check that it looks like a T. Once you've made your T-bars, you can then go ahead and add the pollen. And the way I do that is by taking the T-bar, I'm going to dunk it in some water, it's just normal water in here, just you can boil it if you want to, just the head, just the T-bar bit, swing it a little bit so that the excess water comes off, and then dip it into your CMC or Tylose powder, otherwise known as gum tragacanth. Again, spin it a little bit so that you haven't got a huge amount on there. Dunk that head of the T-bar back into your water, just spin to get rid of the excess. And then that wetted piece of wire with the CMC on goes into your yellow petal dust. And just spin it again so that when it comes out, it reveals just a tiny, tiny sausage on a stick that's turned yellow. And that would be how I'd make any kind of handmade stamen. Into your water, into your CMC, back into your water, back into your colour. Or sometimes you can make more textured pollen by mixing the petal dust colour with semolina or ground rice, and then you get a really good texture. But this is quite a fine finish, so we don't need to add any semolina or ground rice to this particular stamen head. So this I'd just dry upright, and I'll do the other three. So just showing you again into the water, give it a spin, into your CMC, give it a spin. You've got to go back in the water to wet the CMC, that makes it sticky. And then into your yellow pollen or petal dust. Now the CMC is also known as Tylose powder or gum tragacanth, and CMC and Tylose powder are a man-made chemical of the gum tragacanth that you may have heard of, which is actually the sap from a tree that they dry into a powder and you can use. But gum tragacanth is more expensive than CMC and it's faster working. It's got a creamy texture, a creamy colour to it as well. So sometimes that can affect what you're making. So the CMC or Tylose powder, as it's known in Europe and internationally, is perfectly usable for this. It's also used to make the sugar glue, and we add it to sugar paste to strengthen it to make models. So that's my last one twisted through there. And now what I'm going to do is show you how to make the pistil, which goes in the middle. So the pistil is made using a half length of 24 gauge wire and a small strip of white Stemtex tape. This is a half width. Stretch the tape to make sure that all the glue is released, and then lay the wire over the tape, but a little way down from the top, maybe a centimetre. Flip the tape over the wire just to start to secure it. That will leave you with a flap, and then go ahead and tape down. You don't need to tape down too far, maybe 2 inches, just to make sure the flap doesn't pull off, because this bit is going to be under tape later on. Straighten the flap up. Turn it so that the flap's facing you. And then we're going to trim. So I'm just going to trim across the top here. So I've got maybe half a centimetre length between the wire end and the edge of the tape. And then if you turn it the other way, I actually want to just tidy this up a little bit. Kind of looks a little bit like a mini spade. I now want to support the scissors with my finger just to help me guide this, and I'm going to take a little section off here to straighten up the flap, and likewise on the other side. So you end up with this little rectangular shape at the end. And that now needs to be divided in two. So just take your scissors, the end of the wire is here. So you're just going to take your scissors, divide that tape into two sections. If you need to straighten it up, you can. And then you're going to curl one way and one the other way. It's a very strange looking piece, but this is actually what is in the middle if you're making a botanically accurate flower. Now, what I'm showing you as well can be improved on as well. For competition work, you would really need to study the flower to get this right. To attach the stamens to the pistil, once these are dry, you want to bend an angle into each of the stamen lengths, two of which are going to be maybe 1 centimetre before the bend, and the other one's about 1.5 centimetres before the bends. So you have two that are going to end up being longer than the others. Take yourself a short length of half width Stemtex tape. Don't stretch it at this stage because we need to cut it into a 1/4 width to be able to use it neatly. Fold the Stemtex tape strip in half lengthways and again until you've got something that will fit through your scissors. Take a large pair of scissors and divide the Stemtex tape into, just cut confidently down, and you'll end up with a 1/4 width tape. Unravel one section. You won't use it all, that's why you only need a short strip. And you can store these in a plastic bag once they've been cut, and they shouldn't dry out. So this will end up giving you something that is a 1/4 width, so half the width of your half width tape. Because you can buy full width tape as well. Now we need to attach the two short end stamens just slightly lower than where the wire is at the top of the pistil. So just take your tape and join it where the bend is on your stamens. So the first shortest two or the longest two can go in, and then you can add in your other two. So you have two that are on two long ones on one side and two short ones on the other. Don't worry too much because they will move around and we can adjust where they are shortly. This also you'll find is any excess pollen will come off, so just make sure that your board that you're going to roll out paste on later is not in the way. And then you can tape this down. Now there'll come a point where you'll find that the tape is twisting because it's quite thin. So at that point where you're well away from where you're trying to attach, you can just use the normal half width tape to tape the rest of the stem down, and you would go all the way down until you get to the point where you've only got one main wire, or further if you want to. I had a bit left over so I could do that. And then what we want to do is actually bend these wires so that they have a bit of a curve on it. Now what I want to do is show you how to curve a wire. I've just got a 28 gauge wire here, which I'm just going to show you. This is a bit of a demo. So we're just going to start by clamping the wire, and then I'm going to tweak it to one side. It can be left or right depending on how you're holding the wire, but if you just bring your tweezers down 1 millimeter at a time, and each time just close it up and tweak it slightly, you'll find that you will start to see an arc or a curve, and that looks so much better than simply clamping and bending, which gives you a sharp angle. So following that principle, we want to do that from the base of the flower, sorry, the stamens, base of the stamens. If I bring all of these out, just so that they're not going to knock into the center pistil as we're bending them, clamp the base of the wire and then tweak it slightly to one side so it's curving in towards the pistil, and you should get a curve. And you can see all the excess coming off, but it doesn't matter because we can clean that surface afterwards, and there's still enough on the actual piece. So just work your way around curving each stem of the stamens. Now I would say these are time consuming to make, and they sometimes don't fit the smallest ones. It depends what cutters you've got. So it's just a know-how really, and if you really want to get into it in some detail, then this is how you would make it. So that is something that looks a bit more botanically correct. We now need to put an ovary on the bottom of this, which is made in with a small piece of gooseberry green, pale green coloured paste. So I'm just going to show you how to do that. Take a small ball, which is only about ½ centimetre diameter, so a pip-sized ball of pale gooseberry green coloured paste. I'm using this one here, the Sugar Flare, but you just want something that's a little bit yellowy in colour, so limey shade. Pop that into the palm of your hand and use your finger to roll it into a tic-tac shape or elongated sausage, which will end up being about 1 centimetre in diameter. And then we can put that without any glue at the base of the stem, just under where all the stamens have been taped in, and then just wrap around and pinch shut. Take your 3 fingers, so two pointing fingers and a thumb, and press in. If you're right-handed, you might have a different finger and thumb, but you know, different thumb. And then do the same at the bottom. So position it between your 2 fingers and then press with your thumb, just to make that a little bit more pod shaped, just slightly narrower on the top and the bottom. And once you've done that, you can mark it with a cutting wheel. So we're just going to take the small end of the cutting wheel and draw in a line. Now, I would say 3 or maybe 4. You can, if you wanted to position them, you could make them come in between those stamens. That would be a good little guide. And that is your stamen completed. Or should I say your centre completed. So there you have an example or a choice really. These are much quicker to work with, or you could go ahead and use, make the real, something that looks more real. The interesting thing on these though as well is that you could actually dip the tips of these into water, into your CMC, and then back into your water and into your lemon yellow petal dust. And then you would have 3 little dots of stamen head. And that would be another option for something that's in the middle. I'll just show you what I mean. I'll keep one that is just a framework. This one though, I can just find the, you know, just put the little ends. You don't want to go too far. Again, with the CMC as well, you can see that that is picking up some of the mixture and it's giving you a rounded tip in those 3 forks. If we go into the water again, I'll spin that a little bit just so that you can see that's also again making a little bit more. And assuming this fits into your pot, you can make it pick up some of the yellow. But you're going to need to spin that. See, there's a little bit excess crumb here, which would need to come off because that is not going to stay on. Let's just take that off. Okay, so once you've got your yellow on there, you would need to let that dry. You can't really put it back into the water because it will come off. But that would be a quick way, a quick solution. And because they've got 4 stamens, if you wanted to, you could make a 4th one as your cage. You could put 4 24 gauge wires in instead. And then all you'd be missing is the pistil in the center. But I suppose in a way you could actually make the pistil and speed things up by then subsequently taping that one and one more in. Okay, so there's a few options there on how you can speed things up for yourself. The next step is to work on the main flower, and the cutter set from Fine Cut comes in 3 different sizes, and you would use different sizes for parts of the flower. So for example, right at the top nearest the buds would be the smallest one, and then you would go up to the medium and maybe probably make a couple of rows of small, medium, and then a couple of rows or maybe one row of large. If you can't get hold of the cutters, then you can cut them out of plastic or cardboard, such as a cereal packet. It's better if you have a shiny surface, because the rough surface of cardboard will stick. It won't necessarily come off the paste so easily. So plastic's useful, but you need plenty of corn flour just to make sure it doesn't attach. And just be aware that there are different makes of these cutters out there. So if it's not from fine cut cutters, you would need to maybe make everything a bit smaller, because there is one particular make where this smallest one is their largest one. So if you find that your cages or your stamen middles are coming out too big, then you might need to downscale what you're doing just to accommodate your cutters. I am going to use the middle-sized one initially because it's easier to work with than the others. And I'm going to use Squire's Kitchen Sugar Flour Paste as my paste today. Okay, so this is the paste, and I'm only taking a little bit out of the packet. I don't need to work with a huge amount, just enough to actually get one shape rolled out, and the rest of your paste needs to be packed away tightly in a freezer bag so it doesn't dry out. Make sure that you actually warm the paste up properly. There's no point in just pulling it out of the packet and rolling. You do need to incorporate. It's got white colouring in there, as well as the fat content and the gunpowder. It all needs to be incorporated and evenly spread to make this paste work. And just to help us a little bit, it's better if you have a bit of just corn flour rather than icing sugar on your surface, just to help with the rolling out and prevent it from sticking too firmly, especially if it's humid outside or if it's damp. Today is quite damp. This is a fresh packet of paste as well, so that makes a difference. It can make it feel more sticky. So to start with, we're just going to roll it out, but not too thinly. And the reason for that is because I need to keep one area of this fairly thick so that it will hold up the back end of the flour. The paste here is about a millimetre and a half thick. And I'm just going to now roll, but leaving a triangle of thick paste in the middle here. So just turn your rolling pin at a bit of an angle, and I've got a bit of a ridge forming now, and carry on rolling. It doesn't matter at this stage if the paste sticks to the surface. It might make it easier if it does, but either way it doesn't matter. So nice and firm with your pressing, keeping this area here thick. It's very difficult for you to see this. I will hold it up in a moment once it's gone, once I've made it a little bit thinner. But you mustn't have thick paste other than that area, because otherwise the weight of the flour will just be too much. Okay, so if I show you here, it's nice and thin, but that bottom edge, which is where I've kept it thick, is thicker, and it's in this area here is thick. Okay, it's very difficult to see. So pressing down and rolling. And of course, you've got to make sure that this is big enough to hold your cutter. So we'll turn this so we've got this bridge part uppermost, and I've got a thick area here, which I want to focus on this area here. So it's the bottom less than a third really that needs to be thick here. So I'm going to press that down, give it a good old rub, pull the excess paste from around, and this can all be reused, so cover it up. Rub your finger gently without cutting yourself around, just to give yourself a nice crisp cut. And when that shape comes out, you'll see that it's nice and thin around the edge until you get to that bottom part here, which is thicker. Okay, so it's thicker in this area here. Once you've got your shape, you can actually put it through your veiner. So I'm using a poppy veiner, but you could use a rose petal veiner. We're going to line it up so the tapered end is towards the tapered end of the veiner. PP, it's reading PP. The shape is going to go in the bottom. If your veiner is upside down, it will read DD, in which case you have to put it in the top. because there's a certain way around. This side will give you, on the back, will give you more raised parts, which is actually going to be the outside of the flower. And this will give you the indents, which will be in the inside. So we'll close the vena up, press down nice and firm. Peel it off, but keep it the same way up. And if I can get that close enough, you might just be able to see the texture. So it's a bit more raised on the back. That's going to be the outside. This is how it came out of the vena from here, and that's going to be the inside. So what I suggest we do now is actually use a fine pair of scissors to cut in some exaggerated little indents. Now you can do this once you've rolled the flower up, but it's possibly easier to do it now. I'm just going to reset the camera. Okay, so I'm going to pick the shape up and come into this first scallop here and cut in a little triangle. Okay, so like I say, you could do this once the flower's assembled. We'll see how this works. So, and again here. So what we're doing is just creating a deeper cut on those two outer scallops. Drop it down onto your surface and take some glue. It's just your normal sugar glue. Paint some glue along one edge, so a little bit here, but a bit more on this bit because we're going to overlap this completely in a moment. But just be careful that you don't paint right to the edge. So once you've put that glue along that area there, you need to go ahead and take something like a slim paintbrush stem just to help you start to wrap this piece around. And the idea is that this scallop here is going to turn round and go directly on top of the other end. And just watch out, because if you haven't got cornflour on your brush stem, you'll find that it could stick. So we're just going to start by trying to overlap. It's a bit tricky. You can start off by matching these two scalloped ends, and then put your paintbrush back in and just gradually just overlap. You won't have to overlap it as much towards the bottom, and you need to leave the end open because that's where your centered piece that you've made will go. So you can see now you've got two scallops here overlapped. So make sure you've got enough cornflour on here just so that it doesn't stick. And I'm going to put a little bit of cornflour on the join just in case there's any glue that has bled out. So this now can be placed face down onto my surface. And I'm going to use my silk veining tool, or you could use a cocktail stick for this process, to thin and press this bottom part down. So placing the veining tool into the center of the big scallop and in by about 2 centimeters, we can roll side to side. Now, if you find that there's glue, you will need to put more corn flour in there to dry it out, because that bleeding glue could cause a problem. So we'll just give that an extra pat with corn flour. So just coming in a bit closer so you can see, but we're going to just roll from side to side, and that will not only thin that double layer of scallops, it will also broaden that section. And because you've cut out your little V's, you'll find that they shouldn't crash into the smaller scallop. So just work right to the edge, but just taking care that where you have cut doesn't overlap itself with the small scallops on the top. So at this stage, I've just transferred it onto my foam pad. And I want to use the small end of my bone modelling tool with a little bit of corn flour on there, just to help it not stick. And run the tool using it face down to thin and frill that outer edge of the piece that we've been working on. Now, we are also going to do the smaller scallops, so I'll show you how, but we'll just get this one done first. Come all the way around the side as well. And because I'm pressing down quite firmly and it's on the small end, you'll find that it will give you a nice frill. So then you can move that petal part out of the way. If I just show you that a little bit closer. So we're going to turn it over onto its side now, move that part out of the way and continue having added a little bit of corn flour onto the tool so it doesn't stick. There's a lot of processes to follow on this. And of course, when you first start, it takes longer to make these pieces. And it's real possibility you'll have to make a first few until you'll understand what you're doing and you'll get a bit quicker and then they won't dry out on you. But you could, if you wanted to, if the shape has dried a little bit too much, you can actually just set the kettle off and steam it a little bit just so it softens. And that way you should be able to work with it. So now I've got my two little scallops at the top, two at the side, all a little bit frilled, and then this one at the base, which I'm just going to curl and shape a little bit. And if I show you the side profile, move this up because I think this is a better background for what we're looking at. Okay, now where the two small scallops are, that is actually the top, and the indent here is the divide. And my last little task before it's ready to go onto the main centerpiece is to put my back of my paintbrush, or you can use your veining tool, position it so that it's in the middle of those two small scallops at the top, and then between your finger and thumb, pinch in a ridge all the way down as far as you can, so probably about 2/3 of the way down. And then you can remove the tool. And that gives you a ridge up the center of the top. And that is your flower ready to assemble onto the main stem. So we'll take the stamen prepared one, the botanically almost correct one, and I'll just clean off the bottom because it's been sitting in the oasis. And from the very tip end, so very end, we're going to feed that through the front of the flower. So that goes in. And then we're going to pull the center through almost all the way. Take a little bit of glue. Sorry for the wobble. And paint just a small amount of glue around the base of the ovary that you've made. And then that would feed through and in. Now you'll get it so far and then it'll want to stop. So you want to avoid trying to pull it too far through. Before it bulges, you need to stop. So on the smaller petals, they're going to be inset just a little way. On the larger petals, they'll go in much further. Okay. And here at the back, you want to leave quite a length, but I also want to trim and tighten up. So probably about this far from the end, which will be no more than 1 centimetre. We're just going to use our fingers and thumbs to press down evenly around. And you'll get to the point where it's worked onto the wire so far that you can just use your nails as a guide, press in, and then when you're ready, pull the excess off from around. And we're going to neaten that up. Okay, so just check. Now, if you're positioning those stamens, if you're positioning the stamens, you'll probably find that they'll move around. But the idea is if you're making it botanically correct, the lower two that you taped in would be towards the top here, and the longer two would be towards the bottom. I've probably got them the wrong way around, but it doesn't matter. This would then want to be bent on the stem so that it sits in the oasis on the main stem with this hanging off the side so it can dry upside down. The little cage you made and the one where you just put the stamen dots on the end would be inserted in the same way, just with a little bit of glue at the base here, and then it is fed through right into almost the back of the flower. You may need to push these in a little bit, just depending on how wide the flower is. You may need to just narrow this part so it doesn't push the petals out. To make the tiny buds at the tip of the flower, we want to use 28 gauge wire that's been cut into 3. I'm going to make 3 buds. So we just level up your 28 gauge wires. You can do 5 or 6 like this at a time. Bend over the end so you get a nice tight, closed up, rounded head hook. With your green paste, which we've just coloured with the gooseberry green, so it's still quite pale, because you can colour it up using your petal dust colours or your airbrush colours. When you're making these buds, they do grow in, so you start off with small ones, maybe ½ centimetre, and then you could go up to 1 centimetre before they start to change their shape. And I'm going to show you just 3 variations, 3 different variations in size, and then I'm going to show you how to make the bigger buds as well. And those are the ones where they almost start to look like they're going to open into the flower. But this is fairly nondescript bud. Generic, you see it a lot in nature. So my ball, I've got 3 different sizes, starting with the ½ centimetre, and that progresses up to just under 1 centimetre. Okay, it's probably 3/4. So they're still all quite small. But make sure they're crack free before you put them onto the hooks. So we're going to pierce the centre of the ball from the back end. So my hooked end is at the front here. A little bit of glue. Push that onto and into the ball. And then between your finger and thumb, pinch and twiddle the top. So you end up with a cone. Using your cutting wheel, smooth that out the way, support the back of the bud and draw a groove in 3 equal distant places around the bud. As you draw, you can come off the top here. Looks like, possibly make it look a bit more like it's going to open. Take your next 2. So these 2 are slightly bigger than each other. So I've got 3 different size buds here. Feed it through from the back, so your hooked wire is not quite going through. Get it part way through before you glue. It makes it less messy, but you really don't want to put much glue on that hook. Pull it through, pinch so it closes, and then once it starts to close, you can twiddle it between your finger and thumb, and that will help it come to a point. Doesn't matter if you use the large or the small end of the cutting wheel, it's whatever fits with you. So 3 marks. Do the last one. Just make sure they're crack free before you start. Draw it in, bit of glue if you feel like it needs. If your paste is quite soft, you might not need the glue. So pinch it shut at the end and give it a good twiddle to turn, and that should close it up. And this one, in a minute, you'll notice that that is slightly bigger than the others. So we've got 3 varying sizes of bud. Now you could do many more. You could make many more. It really depends on how long and big you want your piece to be. So I'm just showing you 3, but you can do many more. So I'm just going to pre-tape, but not very far down. I'm going to just start my taping a little bit lower down than where the bud is. And then before I've twisted it too many times, it should be loose enough to be able to push the tape up to the bud itself. And you can do that to all of them. So start it lower down, have your tape nice and stretched, and pull up to where it needs to be, and keep that at a tight angle, a couple of twists, and then pull off. So it's probably only about an inch. You don't want to tape everything all the way down, because not only are you using lots of tape, you're also going to make your stem super thick. Okay, so there are your buds. To make the slightly larger, more detailed buds, we would take a 24 gauge wire, cut in half, and put a hook in the end. Then we can take ourselves a little bit of the green paste. So as a measurement guide, about 1.5 centimeters. Okay, so this again can start small, so they'd be bigger always than the buds I've just shown you, bigger than the tiny buds, and they do grow bigger before they open into a flower, and as they grow bigger they become paler. So you can maybe make some that are smallish and using the green paste, and then others that have got half green half white, and then you could move on to just white only for the buds. So here I'm just going to use my finger and thumb to pinch one end and create a cone shape. And when I've made the cone, this one is 2 centimeters long and about 1 centimeter wide, just over. I'm just going to give it a little press in my palm of my hand so it's slightly flattened. And while it's still in my palm, I'm going to go back to my cutter and use one of the large scalloped ends just to press down in. Wobble it up and down a little bit so it helps it open, to create a little sad face. Now, if you haven't got one of the cutters and you're using a template, then you could use your cutting wheel to do that. It's not as accurate, but it will work. Now, to finish this off, we do need to use our cutting wheel. I'm going to take the large end and I'm going to press down in the top here in the center and draw a line down to divide the sad face. And then if you turn it over, you continue that line down the back of the bud, and you would draw in some lines that are just fanning out towards the side, down the base, at the base. So you could actually do this, you could make the shape, pop it onto the wire and then texture, but I find it tends to wobble around, so I prefer to do it off the wire. A little bit of glue onto the hooked end, and that's going to go into the pointed end. Okay, and then you can just close that up and neaten it. If you need to, you can retexture. So I'll just put a bit, press in a bit more there. Careful not to draw any double lines. Okay, and that is your bud. So there'll be different size buds depending on what you want to do. I'll just bring this piece in and show you what we're trying to make. We've been making these, and now we're making these. Okay, and we've made the bellflower. So this bud as well, we could tape down. It's always a good idea to tape these as you go, so you haven't got to keep coming back to everything. But it doesn't have to be taped too far because it is being taped in tight to the stem. All right, so that is your bud. I just want to come back to these pieces here and show you how to make some paper bracts, which is extra detail that you don't need to put on, but I'll show you anyway. So if you take a small strip of tape and give it a good stretch so that it can't, fully stretch it so all the glue comes out, then straighten off one end and turn the scissors to an angle so you're cutting almost a triangle. And that piece with the triangle facing upwards, it's very fiddly, position the straight cut end onto the wire just underneath the bud and then give it a little twiddle on, and then you've got yourself a little bract on the back of the bud. But this is extra detail that you may decide is not necessary. We want to do that for every one of these tiny buds. So I'll just cut a couple more on and show you how they go on. So it's kind of a triangle, or it's at least one end to a point, but the other end is actually straightened. Position on the, just under the bud, press firm, just careful not to disturb the bud. Do the last one. Little twiddle, curl. Just make that a bit closer so you can see. I'll show you next how to make the bracts. Again, these are optional. They're tiny, tiny little leaves. So probably similar size to the smallest little pip, 1/2 centimetre diameter of the gooseberry green. Roll it into a tic-tac shape. This is a 28 gauge wire. Push the wire through the centre. You can come out the other end if you want to, just by a little way. And then pinch and twiddle one end so that it becomes tapered or pointed, narrow on the wire. Looks a bit like a bud now, but what we're going to do is do the same on the other side so it looks a little bit like a torpedo. If you put that between your palms and roll, it should kind of flatten it so you haven't got a wobbly side. And now we can put it into our little veiner. This is a foxglove leaf veiner, and you would work at the top because down here is very grooved. Press firmly and reveal. So this I'm going to take on its side and curve slightly, and we can close it up a little bit. And that is your bract, and they are positioned every now and again on the stem. I'm going to make 3 of these very quickly so you can see. They're fast to make and you don't need a cutter. Into a tic-tac shape. Make sure your paste is crack free. Push the wire through. It can come out the other end, but only a little way. Twiddle the base and the top. In between your palms. A couple of rolls just to smooth it out a little bit. And then position in your veiner near the top so it doesn't become very super grooved. And then curve and close up just a little bit. Last one. And these can go up in size a little bit, but mostly they're quite small. The large leaves, which I'll show you next, are made, and they really only sit at the base of the flower. And to be honest, in cake decorating, it's unlikely that you'll put them in unless you're trying to make something look botanically correct. So twiddle at the base. This one's the largest one of the 3. Everything looks good in 3s. Roll between your palms. There's a little bit of wire showing there, so I need to twiddle that just a little bit more. And then we can go ahead, place it in the center of your veiner. Make sure it stays lined up in the middle. If you feel as well that you haven't got a central line, you can actually use your cutting wheel to draw up the middle of that, just to define the vein in the center a bit more curve. And that definition with the cutting wheel will help you close the leaf up a little bit as well, the bract up. So those are your 3 leaves. Now what I'm going to do is show you how to make the large leaf. Now the large leaf is using the foxglove veiner. It's actually, this is a lily petal veiner, 28 gauge wires to feed in, and I've just darkened the sugar flower paste with a bit more of the gooseberry green because the leaves themselves are darker in shade. I've saved a little bit for a calyx, which I'll show you in a moment, and then we're ready to colour. So this has to be rolled across a ridge nice and thin. Peel off to reveal the ridge. And line up your cutter so that it's in the centre, so the ridge is in the centre. And press down. It's just like making a normal leaf. Rub the edges of the paste if you can, much better, cleaner. You get a cleaner cut for sure. And then we're ready to feed the 28 gauge wire in. So just apply a bit of pinching pressure between your finger and thumb and push the wire carefully in, keeping the wire nice and straight. Otherwise it's going to go off center. If you can feel it coming out, you need to stop and reposition the wire so that it can travel up the center of the ridge and not poke out. So we'll have a little bit of corn flour on there just to stop it from sticking because it feels a little bit on the soft side. And this time we can now position this with the ridge face down in the recessed part of my veiner. This Foxglove veiner does beautiful primrose leaves, and there's another flower on it. I'll have to remember it in a moment. I can't remember what it is. But it's a really lovely, lovely texture. You could make sage out of this as well, for sure. So once you've actually textured the leaf, you can transfer this onto your foam pad. A little bit of corn flour on the big end of your bone modelling tool. And we're just going to draw all the way on both sides. And we're going to curl it like we did the bracts and close it a little bit. And that is your leaf. And we need to set that upside down. So I'm just going to put a little loop in there. This part will sit on the oasis and this will just hang down on the side. The height of the oasis should mean that it won't actually touch the surface. So that's just gone on to my oasis. Last of all is the calyx that goes on the back of the flower, and this you could put on once you've coloured if you want to, but I'm just going to show it to you now because then all the making is done. Just bear in mind as well that these calyxes can actually be in the way of putting the flowers together, and I would say possibly there's something that you don't have to put on, but I'll show it to you anyway. So I've just got a small jasmine cutter and a little bit of my pale gooseberry green colour. Use something sharp to push out the paste from the cutter. And then when it has come out, we'll just put the excess paste under cover. You can, if we can lever this up, or we could actually use the cutting wheel to do this. Just take off the tip all the way around. So a pair of scissors or a cutting wheel, because we don't want the point. Now these have got a little bit more texture. If you want to add it, you can. They've got lines on them, but now we're getting into a lot of detail. So if you want to, you can use the cutting wheel to cut in little lines that go from just from the inner part of the petal. You don't have to draw, you can even just press. And this piece now, if we can pick it up, would actually be fed onto the back of the flower that you've made. So I'm just going to feed that through the center of the main stem. Do it carefully because it might split. It's a very small piece. And then with only a tiny, tiny amount of glue, so make sure you drain the excess of the glue from on the edge of the pot, say, and we can drop that in. And my texture is on the back side. This I would suggest you close up so that it doesn't obstruct other flowers from coming close to it. So that's all the making made. And now what I'm going to do is clear the decks and show you the colouring. We'll do it by petal dust. I'll talk you through that roughly. and then I'll show you a little bit by airbrush, and then we can put it together. So to colour, what I've got here is plum petal dust. I've got moss green and lemon yellow. Might need a little bit more plum, but I'll put that in there if I need it. And I've got 2 paint brushes. I'm going to use one for the plum and one for the green. I've also got a palette which has got a small amount of clear alcohol, gin, vodka, rum, anything you don't drink, and some plum petal dust which I've started to dilute here, which is ready for the dots. So the first thing I would do is colour the main part of the flower, and we would use the plum petal dust to do this. So just take some of the plum petal dust onto your brush, and once it's on your brush, you want to kind of work it in. So I'm just using another piece of tissue to help me with this, because you don't want to overload the colour onto the paste, onto your shape, onto your flower. And then, having made sure all your tools around you are put away, because this will go everywhere, you want to start to colour from the outside edge in. Now, we've worked with white because what you'll find is when you look at the flowers, they have white in them, and that's your lightest colour. So whatever your lightest colour on the flower is, that's what you start with. If you try and colour this pink and then work with it, you'll find that you won't be able to get the white on there, and it will just look a little bit murky. So it's always better to just find the lightest shade of colour on your flower that you're making, that you're copying, and then the rest is developed using petal dust, or you can airbrush, and I'll show you in a minute how to airbrush. So just always from the outside drawing in, catching the edge of the shape each time you draw the brush, and you colour. So that would be the outside edge. And now we want to do the same with the back. So just support the flower as well, especially if it's a little bit on the damp side still. Catching the outside edge, drawing the colour down the main funnel part of the flower. And you can make the colour as strong as you like. It can be quite pale. What I'm trying to do though is avoid this bottom area here where I want to add in a little bit of lime green. And you don't want to combine the green and the pink because you will end up with a brown. So when you finish colouring the outside edge and drawing the shade down as far as you would like, you can go ahead and do something with the base. So I'm just taking a little bit of my moss green lemon yellow mix. So I've just got just a bit of moss green and the lemon yellow. I love those shades. They're by Spectral. They are Sugar Flare, not Spectral, Sugar Flare Blossom Tints, and I've worked with them for years. I just love the shades. And sometimes you get used to what you like, and I like to stick with them. So just colour the base and bring that green up. And we're leaving areas that are uncoloured as well because we want the white definition, just to give it some interest. So I've just put a little bit on the base there. This one hasn't got a calyx. It's one I made earlier. It also hasn't got the stamen centre. It's just got the cheek centre, which works perfectly fine. And then we're going to support this because we now want to paint in some freckles. So I've just got some of my alcohol and some plum. Oh, I don't know what that is. I've got to take it from here. Okay, and once you've blended your colours, if you twist your brush, it should come to a bit of a point. And then the idea is you just simply lay the point, the tip of your brush onto the paste, onto your shape, and then go ahead and colour. This has got a bit bitty. I think there might be some fat in that, so that's possibly why it's coming out a bit split looking. So here we just want to lay the brush and dot some tiny freckles, some that are bigger than others. And if you want to, you can just reload your brush in between so you've got stronger definition. Now this is something you can just about do with an airbrush, but it can be a little bit scary. And you want those dots to look random and not too splodgy. With the buds, they have a limited amount of colour on them. We're going back to the green colouring brush, mix of moss green, lemon yellow. With the buds, even if you're airbrushing, I would probably do these by hand because they only need a little bit of colour. So I'm just using my lime green shade again and catching a little bit on the base and a little bit on the top, and it's only to make them look more realistic. It's not really going to make a huge difference. Visually on film, on the camera, you can't really see it at all. The same would go for these ones. At the base and a little bit at the tip, but really not a lot. They're very pale and not different in colour at all. There's not a lot of green shades on them. They're just purely one shade. These have got freckles on the top here, and this is the bit that opens to become the bottom of the flower. So you can just add in some little freckles. Put that aside, and then the bract, again, I would colour these by hand. So really it's only the flowers that you'd probably do the detail in the airbrush. And again, just support the back while you mix your lime shades and add colour. Just brush them over a little bit. Just to give it some definition. There's a slight difference in the shade. Okay, so I'm just going to do these two as well, just very quickly, and then I'll show you how to airbrush, and after that we'll go to the final assembly. So there are a lot of details in this flower, but at the end of the day it really depends. You can not have the bracts, you can not put the little bits of tape on the buds, and you don't have to make the stamens. So you can speed the process up depending on what you're trying to make. So with the airbrushing, all I'm going to do is just show you how to apply the pink colouring onto the actual flower and give you a little bit of an insight into how to make the dots. So I've got this is the Squire's Kitchen, and it's the pop pink. I'm going to make about 4 drops in there. That should be enough to do what we need. You don't need much at all. Certainly don't fill the reservoir up. And when it comes to airbrushing, I do actually do an introduction to airbrushing techniques class, and it's a good idea to attend something like that before you start trying to colour your flowers, or at least practice on some spare ones in advance, just so that you don't mess up all your creations. That would be a shame. So I'm going to turn my compressor on, and mine's a dual action pen, which means that when you turn the compressor on, nothing will come out. Okay, you have to actually press down the valve to make it activate. And to make the colour come out, you have to press down and pull back, and then the colour will come out. On a single action, when you turn it on, when you turn the compressor on, you will feel air straight away. And then that means it's a little bit simpler to use. You just pull the gear back and that will let the colour out because your air is already doing it. The only difference really is when you come to finer detail, and if you're trying to make things like the speckles, it's actually harder to do on using a single action. Now, I know that I'm colouring white on white, but I don't want to, I've got a bit of kitchen towel or paper here just so I don't damage my surface. And it's also a very good idea, I'm just going to put that down a second just to put some gloves on, because the colour can go into your hands and it takes a while for it to come off, and also it actually feels uncomfortable, the cold air coming through, so I prefer to wear gloves while I'm doing this. So I'm just going to get the pressure of the air coming out, and I'm practicing on my surface to make sure that the colour is coming out how I want. And then I'm about 3 inches away from my piece. And it's a good idea to, like you've concentrated colouring from the outside edge in, the same. It's same principles as brushing with a dry brush with the petal dust. Okay, so pressing down and pulling out, or just pulling back if you've got a single action. And you're just going to start building up the colours. Don't pull your throttle back too far. And avoid the temptation of coming too close. If you start to see it looking a little bit glossy, then you need to stop and let that dry a fraction before you carry on. You just manoeuvre the shape round so that you can get access to those edges. Make sure everything is out of the way when you do this, and I would recommend a ventilated room and covering everywhere. You can see what it's doing to my fingers, because you don't want it to go on anything. It will clean off, but not off oak tables and anything precious. You see my distance. And you can hear when it's catching the edge as well, which is a good thing. We want that. And we can do some work on the back as well. Somehow I've caught some on there already, but I'm not too worried. And you could colour up your lime green as well and do the base if you wanted to, or if you let it dry, then you can just use petal dusts. So a combination of the two will be absolutely fine, as long as the surface is dry before you apply the petal dusts. Let's just do a little bit on the back here. You can see that that is coming off. I'm actually going to peel that off because we know how to do it, but it is a pain. I don't think I like the calexes on there. I'm just turning. And you can colour this pretty strongly if you wanted to, or you can leave it like that. The colours look a little bit orange on the screen, but they're not. It is pink. You could add a little bit of purple on there, and that would make it, you know, a better shade perhaps. Now, for the speckles, and that's the last bit on the colouring that I'm going to show you, I need to add just a little bit more colour, probably 3 more drops. On these pots, there's a soft spot on the bottle which enables you to squeeze. There's only certain parts of the bottle that you can squeeze to get the colour out. And I have quite a lot of excess colour on my hands, so I'm just going to dry that off. So on the dual action pen, you've got no air coming out to start with. If I pull the lever just back, what it's doing is releasing the ink into the spout of the airbrush. So if I do that just once, it will have dropped some colour into here because there's a needle in there. When you pull this back, it pulls the needle back, which then allows the ink to come through. So it kind of creates a hole. And then if I press down, it'll spit out what I've just dropped back. And you get these little dots. Okay, so pull back, position, press, but don't pull back. Literally pull back. So pull back, position, press once, pull back, position. Now, I've actually got a pressure release valve here, and if I turn that down, you'll hear the motor come on, and you can hear air coming out. And what that means is that it's got very, very low pressure, so it's only going to spit here. So I can actually control my spots and make them bigger. So I pull back, position and press, pull back, position, press. So I can build up my dots however I like, which gives me much more control than if I was trying to use it with full pressure. So on the back of here, so I pull back and press, pull back and press. And if you email me, I can actually give you the link to where you can buy this piece here, which is only suitable for single action, for dual action, sorry. If I tighten that up now, it'll turn the motor off. Now on the single action ones, you'll know you've got a single action because all you can do is pull back. You can't actually press down. And the reason for that, that is locked because when you turn the compressor on, the air comes out already. So it's an easy pen to use. So you turn the compressor on, it gives you the air, and then you pull the throttle back just to let the ink out as much or as little as you like. Now to get the spots though, you don't want the air coming out to start with. So what you need to do is turn the compressor off, pull your inkwell back, and then position and turn the compressor back on, and it should splodge. Now I would say it's very difficult to hold, splodge, support the petal and turn the compressor on. You'd have to have this down on the surface to be able to do it. So I would say perhaps you need to have a third hand, so someone helping you, or paint the dots on by hand if you've got a single action. Okay, and something like this would dry in about half an hour, especially if it was getting too wet. You could then put another layer on in an hour and deepen it. Always good to practice on some spare petals, and then you can really get into it once you know what you're doing. So that's the end of the colouring. All I want to do now is show you how to assemble. I have a whole selection of buds, bracts and flowers, and I'm going to just show you how to put these together. Everything's been prepared and taped down, and some of them have got bracts, others haven't. I've just putting together what I've made. So we start off with the smallest bud, and we're going to line up the next bud halfway down. Okay, so the tip of the second bud is going to come roughly halfway down the initial bud. So we'll just tape that. Now be careful with your taping, make sure it's nice and neat. And then the next bud is going to come down halfway again. So they're bundled together, but you're already starting to create some length to the stem. And then my large one goes in. Now, if you need to, you can actually tape maybe one twist down before you add your next bud. Now, after this, we might decide to put a bract in. So this, we could tape them down, but I'm going to be careful. I'm going to put it in tight. So we could add a little bract in there and tape. And everything's going to be in this kind of dome shape. There's nothing at the back. It's all flat at the back. They often grow up fences. So, you know, the back side of the flower doesn't have much detail. It's the bit that's facing the sun. So these ones here, you can bend backwards with the sad face facing up. And I've got 3 of these to put in. It's quite nice initially to build these up in the same size, but 3 of each. This one this one's higher, this one's slightly larger. It's going to come in a little bit lower. I've got another bract that I can put in. These are in a bit random and towards the top. They kind of protect the buds. And then I can put another one in here. So bend it back on itself so that the sad face is facing up towards the ceiling. Come down each time just a little way. So they're not all lined up side by side. They can be, but you need to give them some room to grow. They kind of crash into each other otherwise. So this we can tweak and turn just a little bit. And I have one more bract, so I'm just going to pop that one in, bend it just a little bit, and that can go in behind this little bud. If you need to, you can pull the wire just to tighten it so you can't see any white. If you've already taped it, you won't be able to do that, so it won't move. Okay, so again, not much detail on the back there. Most of it concentrated in this domed area at the front. And we're trying to create something that looks a little bit like a triangle outline. So now I've got my flowers to go in, and I'll pick my smallest one first. And with these, they need to be bent backwards. Just find my tweezers. So when I'm bending them, I want to clamp them so that I've got the ridge or the shorter part of the frill uppermost. And I bend them very carefully because you don't want to crack it down. So the lip is facing more down. And the less mature ones, the smaller ones at the top, will face more up towards the sky, more at an angle. And as they grow, the weight of the flower turns them horizontal, and then they turn so they face down at an angle. Okay, so we'll pop this one in. I think we'll make that come in the middle, but I've left a bit of a gap, you can see, because I don't want to suddenly feel like I've gone from just gentle sloping to full on out. So I just want to give this a bit of room. So we'll just take that one in. Use your fingers just to neaten the taping up if need be. So this one can face up. And then we're going to bring in, so if I bend, I think what I'll do is bend these all now. So we'll give that, that's quite a small one, and these are fairly large. So I'm going to have 3 roughly in line, and then I'll just show you where the next row would start. And of course, you'd have to keep making to create these, and it can all be put together dry. It's probably safer that way, in which case you can make as many as you like. So this one I'm just going to position in slightly lower down. And then I've got another one to go on this side, but I want to come down just a couple of twists of tape because I know this one's bigger. I'm just going to reset the camera because it's gone a little bit blurry, and we'll show you what those two look like in. Okay. So now this one's coming down the stem just a little bit. It's a bit of a hodgepodge of colouring as well, because there's ones that I've shown you by petal dust and there's others that have been done by airbrush. So it's a bit of a mix. And you could go a lot deeper on your colouring for sure. Just watch out for your taping, make sure it's nice and neat. And then we can go in with the next one, which will go in the middle first. And then you'd have one in here and one in here. And you go back, add in another. And you could do 1 row of small or 2 rows of small, then go up to medium, 2 rows of medium, 2 rows of large. You can decide how big you would like your arrangement to be. And then when you're ready, once you've got all your pieces in, you can go ahead and tape all the way down. Okay, so we'll just tweak what we're doing just to make sure we're happy. And again, I'll just refocus this so you can see. Full 360, so you can see there's not a lot on the back side. As they get bigger, because you want more of a triangle coming out, you could have 4, maybe 5, maybe 6, depending on what you'd like. If I show you this one, which is very old now, you can see that there's a lot more lined up. We've got 5 down the bottom here. 4, so 5, 4, 3, 3, 3. Narrow when it comes up to the top. I probably would have put another bud in there.